You can spend decades trying to find yourself without realizing you were conditioned to never escape the maze. The truth will set you free. They lied. Truth doesn't liberate. It burns. It dissolves the illusion you mistook for identity. It's not a lack of time or motivation. It's a surplus of invisible chains, dressed up as noble values. Family, religion, success, love. Everything was hijacked by a culture of fear, masked as ancient wisdom, and like I once did, you accepted it all as destiny, when in fact, it was a slow, polite execution. This video won't motivate you. It will undress you. It will expose the blind spot that kept you looping with a frozen smile and a suffocated soul. Real growth is betrayal. Betrayal of the persona. Real healing is fire. You believe it takes years of therapy to change. I believe that too. But in 15 minutes with the right question, the right symbol, the right collapse, my inner prison shattered. Not because I was enlightened, but because I finally recognized my suffering had an architect. And that architect was invisible, collective, meticulously installed. Imagine staring at your own face in the mirror and seeing the reflection of every person who ever controlled you smiling behind your eyes. That was my awakening. Collapse, then clarity. We're living in a time where self-awareness is sold like cosmetics, where trauma is monetized and spirituality is stuffed into bite-sized posts with pastel fonts. But the void swallowing you will not be healed with positivity. It's time to go underground, because that's where they buried your freedom. I was a walking emotional corpse for almost 20 years, until the wrong question hit me at the right time and cracked me open. This is the map. This is the warning. This is the beginning of the end of your role. You weren't born afraid to fail. Someone installed that fear into you, quietly, repeatedly, through words sharpened like velvet knives. Do it right. Don't embarrass me. You're better than this. Phrases that seemed harmless but carried hidden emotional codes. They shaped your behavior like invisible bars in a golden cage. Since childhood, you were taught that being loved means obeying, and that rebellion equals abandonment. School didn't teach you to think. It trained you to repeat. You were rewarded for memorizing, not questioning. Obedience was praised as virtue. Restlessness was punished like a virus. The system didn't want free minds, it wanted functional parts. You grew up believing that good grades meant value, that following rules without understanding meant intelligence. And with every automatic yes you gave, another brick was laid in your internal prison. At home, the script was a different theater. Wounded parents, raised on fear, unknowingly passed down the same poison that broke them. Authority was confused with rigidity, love with control, care with surveillance. You learned that showing pain was weakness, that crying was shameful, that vulnerability was dangerous. So you built a persona that smiled while bleeding silently. Religion added another layer to the programming. It told you that wanting too much is sinful, that questioning is rebellion, that suffering is holy. Spirituality became self-censorship, not transcendence. A sacred theater that forced you to swallow your truth in exchange for a heaven you were never sure existed. Meanwhile, the media sold you images of success. Perfect bodies, luxury vacations, picture-perfect love stories. You began to measure your worth through distorted mirrors, comparing yourself to digital ghosts, punishing yourself for not achieving an ideal that was never yours. And every like, every scroll, every little hit of dopamine reinforced your golden leash. You didn't buy into it. You were absorbed by it. You've been wearing masks for so long you forgot what your real face looks like. There's a version of you that laughs at the right times, compliments people you secretly resent, speaks rehearsed lines to appear put together. That version isn't you. It's a projection crafted to be accepted, validated, and controlled. A character trained to survive in a collective theater, where being authentic is dangerous and being fake is rewarded. Carl Jung called it the shadow. All the parts of you you've buried because you were taught they were unlovable. Your anger, your ambition, your hunger to say no. You locked them in a basement of shame and labeled them ugly, immature, wrong. But the truth is, what you repress controls you. It's not you running your life. It's the banished parts, screaming for air through your choices. Every time you say yes when you mean no, a piece of you dies in silence. Every smile that should have been a scream, every silence that should have been a roar, fractures your soul. And you call it maturity. But it's emotional decay in disguise. A slow death, wrapped in social etiquette. You learned to earn affection by erasing yourself, to receive applause by playing small. You became a celebrated actor in a play you despise, cheered on by people who never met your truth. Performance became identity. And the tragedy? You believed you had to keep performing to deserve to exist. Beneath it all is a bone-deep exhaustion. Not from work or noise, but from holding together a version of yourself that's killing you. Your body feels it. Your logic denies it. But your soul is quietly rotting. And the sickness isn't in your symptoms. It's in the silence where your real self is imprisoned. You were convinced that freedom means choosing the flavor of your own poison. 1,000 products, 1,000 promises, 1,000 paths that all lead to the same cliff. The emotional marketplace is more cunning than it appears. It doesn't just sell objects. It sells ready-made identities, wrapped in motivational slogans and aesthetic filters. The packaging is bright, but what you consume is emptiness. You don't buy a phone, you buy status. You don't pay for a vacation, you pay for digital validation. You don't work to live, you live to work, to fuel the dopamine debt cycle disguised as ambition. Daniel Kahneman warned us, we believe we make rational choices, but we're driven by invisible emotional triggers. The truth is harsher. We're emotionally hijacked by belonging narratives. The illusion of freedom shows up as endless options between 2 credit cards, 2 life paths, 2 sanitized identities. The system makes you feel like you're choosing, while it scripts your choices behind the scenes. You're fed slogans that sound like empowerment. You deserve it. Live your dream. Be your best self. But behind those words are algorithms trained to exploit your wounds. You're not the customer, you're the product. Even the self-help industry has been corrupted. It packages pain into monthly plans, sells emotional freedom in 12 payments. Spirituality became branding. Healing became marketing. Your suffering became data. Your hope became inventory. The sacred turned into content. The path inward turned into a funnel. Meanwhile, your anxiety grows like a silent parasite. It doesn't matter how much you buy, achieve, or post. There's always a hunger that nothing satisfies. That hunger isn't physical. It's existential. It's the absence of meaning, dressed as productivity. The loss of self, disguised as freedom. Because the system doesn't want you to be free. It wants you to feel free enough not to notice you're still in chains. There comes a point where pain stops being noise and becomes language. A point where breaking down isn't failure, it's a sign of birth. True rupture doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from the death of the lie. It's when your body says no, when your soul refuses to cooperate with the performance. That moment is sacred, and the system fears it, because that's when you stop obeying, not out of rage, but clarity. Reconstruction begins in silence. Not the noise of webinars, not the flood of quick-fix reels, not the polished voice of life coaches. It begins when you finally sit with yourself, without distraction, when you stare into the void and resist the urge to fill it, when you see your pain not as weakness, but as compass. Gabor Mate says trauma isn't what happens to you, but what happens inside you when you're not allowed to be yourself. That line cracked me open. Maybe it's cracking you too. This is the soil where authenticity grows. Raw, bloody, trembling. It doesn't arrive perfect. It arrives trembling. It shows up with the scars you try to delete. But it's real. For the first time, real. No scripts, no applause, just breath. Just you. Shadow and light relearning how to exist without permission. Authenticity will cost you. You'll lose friends who only knew the mask. You'll disappoint family members who expected you to stay in line. You'll be accused of being selfish for finally choosing yourself. That pain is part of the labor. There's no rebirth without leaving the womb of the lie. And then finally, freedom stops being a concept and becomes flesh. You no longer crave approval. You no longer need to explain. You no longer want to convert anyone. You just walk, one step at a time, with visible scars, but a soul that can finally breathe. One day, without warning, you wake up and realize you're no longer afraid to disappoint anyone. The guilt, the social gaze, the internal critic, they all sound distant, like a foreign language you no longer speak. There is silence, but it's not emptiness. It's peace. For the first time, you don't have to perform. You're allowed to just be. You begin to notice things you once ignored. The rhythm of your breath, the pulse in your chest, the way your body subtly recoils when you're not safe. You no longer beg for belonging. You no longer seek an audience. You no longer fall for salvation promises. Because now you know, you never needed to be saved, you just needed to come back to yourself. There's a raw beauty in this return. You start making choices with your body, not your fear. You walk away from what doesn't resonate. You say no without apologizing. You treat your boundaries like sacred ground. It doesn't make you superior. It makes you real. And truth doesn't need defense. It only needs to be lived. In this space, you finally understand something no course ever taught. That everything you've been chasing outside, recognition, freedom, wholeness, only blooms when you turn inward and choose to stay. Even when it hurts. Even when it terrifies you. Even when every part of you screams to run. That's when the persona dies, and the real one is born. You are not late. You are not broken. You are not wrong. You're just returning. Returning to the moment you were kidnapped by the need to please. And if this video felt like a mirror, a rupture, a call, ritualize your shift now. Comment below. I'm not who they expected. I'm what rose from the ashes they left behind. That's your mantra. That's your line in the sand.